All right, I'm excited now to welcome Stacey Porter, who is the Chief People Officer of Procept BioRobotics. Stacey, welcome back to the show.
Andy, it's so good to be here. It's been a while, and we have had great conversations in between, but it's fun to be back with you.
Absolutely. I was just looking it up. You were last on our show at episode 24 in September of 2018. So it's been
Oh,
almost
wow, look at
7 years.
us.
Almost 7 years since we last did this officially. Like you said, we've had some great conversations in between. And
Yeah.
I know from our last conversation that you have been doing a lot of really exciting things at your company now. And I'm eager to dig into some of those and share with our listeners because I know that a lot of what you're doing is probably a culmination of a lot of learning that you've done in different roles, different companies, in talent development, HR along the way. And it's great when you can take some of that and really implement it not only effectively but also share with others to help them.
I think that's exactly right. It's kind of a culmination of things that we've learned, things that didn't work that you kind of abandoned, and things that you feel really connected to that you want to keep trying and perfecting on. And also, it's just what's right for this culture, right? Like the culture that we're in, this kind of phase of company, and what seems like the right kind of like strategy and programs for this audience.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about culture because I know that is a big focus for you in
It
your
always
role
is.
as Chief People Officer. Tell me about your approach to culture and especially this idea of creating a high performance culture, which I know so many people are trying to create in their own organizations.
Yeah. So, culture is a really important part of any, kind of company, right? It is going to be there.
Hmm.
And I've always thought that if you don't design it to become something, it still becomes something that's like default in a way.
Right.
And I've always thought that there is a reason to build culture like it's its own product, right? Because you do ultimately like sell it to people. You sell it to kind of the people that are coming into your company, prospective talent. You sell it in many ways to the people that are within your company, and invite them to be a part of it and to continue to curate it. But it becomes its own thing. So culture is important. I also feel like culture is kind of one of those things that people have a strange relationship with.
Hmm.
And sometimes it's like, wait, is this something that I consume because it was built for me? Or is this something that I can truly put my fingerprints on and contribute to? And for me, it's always about the latter. And
Mm.
so how do you build a culture that people feel like they can truly, it's malleable enough that individuals can come in and they can put fingerprints on and they can impact and they can see it become a bit different or have language that is used by people around them or even individuals themselves. So
Yeah. Do you
that's one of the things I think about with culture.
do you feel that that is really different depending on the type of company you're going into? And the reason I ask is because, if you're coming into a really mature company, a lot of people might say, well, there's not much I can do to impact the culture because it's already been in this place for maybe decades. Whereas I know you've worked for a lot of growth companies, tech companies in Silicon Valley, but I know you've worked for more mature companies as well. How do you think about that? And do you always feel like no matter what the case is, I want to be in a position where I can impact and influence the culture in a good way?
I love that question. I think, and one of the things that I think we have to acknowledge is there are cultures within a culture.
Mm,
So you can imagine that a company can have a culture, but a team can too. And they can be slightly different because it's kind of like, what do you see every day and what do you feel like every month? It's just kind of like where you're spending your time. But Andy, I think that's a really good point. It is easier when companies are smaller and when you have fewer people to like affect certain things like the language or the structures
mm.
or the ability to build programs and lay down process with speed. And those all have culture attached to them too. So yes, is it something that you can affect when you're in larger companies? I think so, but I think it's also sometimes in smaller, it's maybe in team environments or department environments where you see the biggest impact on culture when a company is bigger.
Right.
When a company is smaller and you're really trying to create common ground, especially between teams,
Mm.
because you don't have all these resources and people are pulling together and many times wearing multiple hats, I think that you can create that contributory culture.
And I guess just to maybe set the context for people listening, the company you work for now, Procept BioRobotics, is more of an early stage, higher growth organization, right? Still raising money. Can you talk a little bit about where the company is with regards to growing and building culture?
Yeah, so it's high growth. It went public in 2021, and is certainly on a path to profitability. But you're right. I mean, we're under 1,000 people, so very much the language that we speak, just the way that we operate around certain aspects of like performance or how we think about what managers need to be great at. Some of these different things are evolving. But what I would say, and you said this well, we are a high performance culture. It's a culture where you have individuals have individual goals and they've got, certainly skin in the game on the corporate goals. And then you've got teams that have a remit that is very clear and you work across groups to make sure that those priorities are harmonized. And then that ladders up to ambitious goals that help the company continue to broadly or broaden our adoption of not only our robot, but also our procedure. Um, and so that high performance culture is interesting because you take high performance people, put them in teams that have authority to make decisions, and
Mm.
then you roll up the work of those teams into what is the work of the company or your goals in a given year, your strategic goals over many years.
Can I ask you, you said something right there. You made sure to mention teams that have authority to make decisions, and I would assume in many organizations that's not necessarily the case. So what do you mean by that?
Well, I think that it's just like individuals too, right? Like, can an individual within their authority make the call?
Mm.
If they are the one closest to an issue, they know it the best, do they get to have the space to make that recommendation? And people say, yes, go do that. That is an indication of what I think of as a winning culture, that people are brought in to do things that they're then able to do.
Mm. Right.
Um, and then you think about that's the level of analysis for that as an individual, but then most often we're organized into teams. So then do the teams have that authority,
Yep.
right? Can they make the call about, a process? Can they make the call about, how we might think about, a product feature? Can they make the call about, a market that we want to access or start to dip our toe into? And I think what's important is to make sure that leadership supports the work and the decision making, the recommendations of those teams that are chartered with doing hard things.
Mm. How do you think about measuring the performance that you mentioned with your culture? When you and I talked last time, you mentioned something about getting 1% better, which is a
Yeah.
phrase that I've heard in the past in more of like the personal development world of like, if we just, instead of setting our sights on huge goals, just focus on getting 1% better every day, we're going to make big progress over time. How do you think about that from an organizational perspective?
Well, you know what? It's a mix of personal and professional, right? I think that in the professional world, we think about, hey, what are the skills that I lend on a daily basis that are really good enough that they don't need to get better? It's like the marathon runner who says, you know what, do I need to really run 40 miles? No, I need to run 26.2.
Mm.
But what are also those things in the professional environment that I'm called to give more of that I still need to continue to build? And so that's kind of the concept of 1% better, which is just continuing to keep your skills refined and making sure even those skills that you're called to, put on display on, regularly are ones that you continue to refine and make impactful. But I also think sometimes when we're really good at something, we don't need to get better at it. We need to look at
Mm.
other things that are complementary strengths. So if I am a strong strategic thinker, but my complementary strength is execution, where I need to focus is execution, right? Because
Mm.
those together have kind of a power impact.
Well, yeah, and you also have to look at which areas are more important to you, right? If you think about the marathon runner, if you've run a marathon and you know you want to run more, Do you try to run a longer distance, or do you try to run the marathon faster, or do you just say, "Hey, this was fun. I don't really care how the next one turns out. I just
Yeah,
want to make sure I
right.
do it again."
What's your goal with the whole thing?
Yeah. Do I just do it again, and do we just keep repeating this because the performance is strong?
And I think that concept of like 1% better is a mindset, right? That mindset is, hey, I'm a person in progress. I'm a person who's evolving. I am going to, really have this sense of resilience that my strengths are good and lasting and durable, but there's still things that I need to build on to get even better at. And
Hmm.
I think in a given year and a given kind of body of work, you can identify, you know what, I can't rest on my laurels on this. Like this is something that I've got to run better meetings, or you know what, I've got to walk straight into hard conversations and manage conflict in a different way. Or, I need to make sure that I've got kind of I don't have the cognitive overload to get things done in a systematic way. So those are some examples.
The last question probably about culture is, how do you think about, or there are things that you have in place to truly define and maintain this culture among a population that is probably growing and changing, especially for people that work in those higher growth companies where you said less than 1,000 employees, but you're probably adding more all the time. The strategy is probably transforming. How do you think about maintaining the strong culture that you have?
I love that question. In culture, one of the biggest indicators of culture is language, right?
Mm.
It's like, what do people say about the company? And how do they interact? Like, what do meetings look like? Do people talk about the company as winning? Do they talk about the company as high accountability? Do they talk about the company as groundbreaking or disruptive, or that it's, that it is, doing something novel? Do they feel like the mission is noble? Is it a patients first company? So part of that language becomes a bit of a culture code.
Mhm.
And you can have certain like monikers that people say, like first teams first, or, bad news early, that actually create mechanisms for how you operate. Because culture, if you think about it, like language are the things that we say, but they're great proxies for the behaviors that come next. And behaviors that show up regularly become rituals, and those rituals become culture.
Mm.
So I always really listen for language, and there are ways that you start to just kind of seed things in cultures too around language, right? Like you can imagine that a high performance culture is going to really talk about how to leverage and optimize people. A culture that may have, kind of a different kind of way of operating, say it's around continuous improvement, might also say, hey, we're here for continuous improvement. So
Mhm.
let's think about, how do we improve as people? How do we improve as teams? How do we improve as professionals? How do we improve, and so that improvement thread kind of goes through all of the different facets. So language is a fascinating part of culture.
Yeah. Speaking of language, I haven't heard you really mention the word managers or leaders yet. But I have a feeling, or at least based on my own experience, I think leaders, managers are the ones who start to really define and translate and communicate what that culture is, right? They set the standards. So how do you think about, or what's your approach to leadership development at BioRobotics to ensure leaders are communicating and maintaining that strong culture?
I love that you asked that. You know me too well, Andy. Even though it's been 7 years, like some things never change. And I think one of the things that is continuing to be really present for me is I believe in managers. I believe in putting really good people into management roles, but giving them a very particular skill set. And we're in my office, so you can see that just like you, I certainly read a lot,
A
and
lot of
there are all
books over
kinds
there.
of theories out there. But one of the things that, and this is kind of honed over time, and it's something that is now not loosely examined, that I strongly believe in, is that managers have to be conversationally competent.
Mm.
And you think about the conversations that managers have to be really good at. And for me, the first one is priorities. It's literally like what work is important and what work is not. And it's not okay to say that 10 things are urgent and important because they all cannot have the same value.
Hmm.
So the manager who truly can sit with an employee and say, hey, let's look at the work and let's say that this is going to go first and this is going to sequence second and this is going to be deferred and this is actually going to be stopped and this is going to be added. It doesn't employ a real service and clarity. So the priority conversation is really critical. Once that conversation is well honed, you want managers to really be able to talk about performance because now, assumably, you've got managers identifying the right work for employees. So they're working on important things that are important for the company. So then you want to have that performance conversation, which is, hey, more of this, less of this. I see your impact here. I'd love to see it here, like that kind of conversation. It doesn't have to be over architected. It literally can be more of this, please, less of this. And so you can give really clear feedback there. And then the last conversation, and this is just because there's a loyalty to careers these days, not so much to companies, is the growth conversation,
Mm.
which is how do you think about the time that you're going to have an individual with you, optimizing them, because if they're putting so much heart and soul, so much intelligence into their work, what are you giving back to make sure that they are competitive in the marketplace for as long as they want to work? So what is that growth conversation? And I love when I meet managers who truly believe in talent flow, which is talent flows in, it's here for a certain amount of time doing impactful work, and then it might flow on to other things. And you just don't hold on to people this tight.
Yeah, absolutely. Can we get into a little bit more of the tactics of how you set up or think about leadership development? I know you have
Yeah.
a program there called Spark for Management
Yeah, we
Development
do.
that you told me
Yeah.
about last time we talked. So, can you tell me more about what that program looks like and what goes into it, who goes through it, and what they get out of it?
Yes, I would love to. And what the reason that we call it Spark is because the focus of it is how do you get the joy of unleashing talents on your
Mm.
team? You've got people's careers in your hands. So how do you just get the joy of kind of like identifying that spark in individuals and really unleashing them to do brave work? So Spark is it's got three prongs to it. And the first prong is that there is an executive spotlight. And the executive spotlight is where we actually sit down with some of our executives and they talk about what they care about. Because a lot of times managers think they know what their bosses care about, but they haven't heard them really step it out and articulate it. So these managers are not talking about the what so much, they're talking about the how. And they're talking about the how they want their teams to operate when they see people doing, really courageous, outstanding work. What are they noticing? What they hold themselves, what principles they hold themselves to. So that's kind of our first entry into Spark. And we typically invite a cohort of about 50 people. So after that, we assign pre-work. And our first 24 to get that pre-work done go into a 2-day immersive. And
Mm.
the 2-day immersive is where they actually learn those three conversations: priorities, performance, and growth. And we do it in a really interactive way. So from minute one, it is literally like an adult learning experience. It's about experiences you've had. It's about models that feel timeless and useful to us. It's about making sure that people are working in small groups and big groups, and we're also teaching within the program from every vantage point. So it's interactive, it's busy. We've got all kinds of interesting aspects that form community in the program. And then after employees or managers graduate from the 2-day immersive, then they have two electives. And the series of electives that we're building are really around those kind of skills that you hone when your team is in different points. So we've got a hiring for great culture fit elective. We've got an elective on high performing teams. We're starting to build an elective around compensation, managing
Mm.
underperformance, all of these different kind of slices of management that you want to do in a thoughtful way, but you can do in kind of a more condensed way. So that's what Spark is. What's interesting about it for us is we don't put people of certain levels into it. We don't put people of certain functions in it. Every single people manager is going through Spark. So it's a mashup because remember, we invite 50 people into a cohort, but we take the 24 that actually get their pre-work done. So typically they're from all different functions and they're at all different levels.
So you invite 50. I assume there's more managers out there, but you invite 50, and there's the first 24 to get their pre-work done that go
Yes.
into that executive level. So I've interviewed dozens and dozens, we're well over 500 episodes here. I don't think I've ever talked to anybody who has created a setup where there's the incentive to get the work done to get to the next level. And it's like the first one's almost like it's a reality game show or something like that. So
Yeah,
what have you
if
seen the
they're
results be from that?
well, you know what's interesting, Andy? I think that, and there's something about this environment. This
Mhm.
environment is high performing, it's personal accountability. You see people like working out in the gym here. I
Mhm.
mean, it really is about like the optimization of self. And so these managers want to get better. They sense the gravity of management. And so those 24 that we take in, what we love about it is they're amped to be there. They're keen to be there. They run in the door.
Mhm.
They participate. Spark is really participative. In fact, we do one thing in it that we have so much fun with, which is we invite people, everybody does this, but you don't know when you're going to do it. We invite somebody to teach something in 2 minutes.
Mm.
And what's fascinating about that is during Spark, it's more like United Nations, right? Like you can learn from anywhere. And at any one point, you're a master, and at any one point, you're a student.
Mhm.
But the teaches that people do in 2 minutes are fascinating. They'll teach you like how to wash a car, or how to create a cocktail, or
Mm.
like, how to clean a lobster, or I mean,
Okay, so it's
it's
not limited to
fantastic.
professional, their professional
No.
role. Got
No,
it.
no, no. We learned yoga poses, we learned kind of box breathing, all kinds of things. It's fascinating.
Love that.
But there's this sense of just that everybody knows something,
Mhm.
and that, we have to kind of look at ourselves, look at what we know, but also be humble enough to realize that there's so much more that we could bring in and kind of incorporate into how we're operating that makes us even stronger professionals.
So I'm still thinking about the 50 that are whittled down to the 24, and I have a couple questions in my mind that maybe other people are thinking of. One, what happens with person number 25 that submits their pre-work an hour or 30 minutes after number 24 and is like,
Yeah.
"Oh, I was right there."
Yeah.
And is there any sort of judgment or anything cast on the people that are like 47, 48, 49 that was like, "Hey, you were here and you obviously you didn't care about this as much as others." Are you looking at them as maybe they're not as high potential, or is that just, "Hey, this just happened, no big deal, try next
No
time?"
way. We're not
Okay.
looking at them like that at all,
Okay.
because the biggest thing is we're all going through Spark. So
Yeah.
like they're coming at some point.
Yeah.
So for us, that 50 is just a slice. Like we've got let's call it 150
Okay.
managers.
So they'll all
So
get a
each
chance to
time
go
we're kind of
through.
rolling through, and we've had 3 cohorts, and we have 3 to 4 to go, but everybody's come with us at some point.
Okay.
So,
So
so no askance looks for people who are kind of at the later part of the pre-work. But once you get the pre-work in, then you go into kind of like you get more of a guaranteed seat for that next cohort.
yeah. How do you think about, well, first of all, just a little bit more ta on the tactics. Is everything done virtually, in person? Is it a mix? How is all this set up?
The executive spotlight is virtual,
Okay.
and then the 2-day immersive is absolutely together on site,
Okay.
sitting right next to each other. It couldn't be any other way.
Okay.
It would not have the alchemy. People would not know each other the way that
Hmm.
they walk out knowing each other. It would not work virtually.
Yeah.
And there have been aspects of my career where I've tried some of this. And what you need is in that 2 day is you need community. You need to sit right next to somebody. You need to really look at somebody when you ask a question and see the nonverbals as well as the verbals. You need to be in a room where somebody says, "Hey, what do you think about what he just said?"
Hmm.
Um, and so there is a real kind of alchemy in community, and there are just so many aspects where you're moving around and meeting different people. And actually, on the first day, we always ask like, who knows everybody's names? And I'm amazed at how quickly they pick it up. I
Hmm.
think it would be different if they were in a virtual environment.
Of
Now,
course.
that being said, the 2 electives that we offer afterwards, those are virtual and they're done very well virtually.
Okay. How do you think about measuring, and I think you told me before, almost all of this has been created in-house, right? You're not working with outside providers, or do you partner with some?
It is absolutely internally created, internally developed, internally taught, internally evaluated, internally optimized.
Just a little bit of pride there too, and we
There's
couldn't
a
use
little bit
some
of
too.
pride there.
I like it. I like it. Okay, how do you think about measuring the impact or the success of the program?
Yeah, so there are a couple of different ways. I mean, we pull it very quickly into our talent practices.
Mhm.
So, as we teach managers how to have their performance conversation, we've got two performance cycles ourselves that they participate in, a mid-year that really is kind of that, how did the first half go and where do you need to focus the second half? And then also we've got, our year-end process. So we look at participation in performance reviews. We also go to our employees post-performance reviews and ask them which managers really contributed to unbelievable clarity and unbelievable experience. And we've got a hall of fame for managers around their performance prowess
Mhm.
in these conversations. The other thing is on our engagement survey, there's one item we're always interested in, which is my managers invested in my success.
Mhm.
And that item, if it hovers around like 80%, we want to see it go up. And in the time that we've been doing running Spark, we do see an uptick in that item. So I think it was like in the high 70s, and then it's gone up a couple of percentage points. And I think it's really this investment in management. The other thing that I'm always interested in, and this is more of a macro indicator, is average tenure. So as you look at an organization, and certainly if you're hiring a lot of people, you're going to have lower average tenures, but average tenure is an indicator of just the length and the longevity and the indication that people see themselves having careers in your company. And so what I'm always interested in is how do you get that to be like 36 months plus?
Mm.
Because we know people get really good at their jobs between year 2 and 3. That
Mhm.
first year, you're really settling in, you're building your relationships, you're starting to find a voice, you're kind of learning how to operate across teams. It's a building year. That second year, a lot of times it's determining how to work, more cross-functionally. It's determining what works most important. You're building skill, you're building a reputation. That third year, people get really, really strong in what they're able to contribute, become more impact players, become culturally significant, maybe knit a bit of history with a bit of future. So you want to see that average tenure go up.
Absolutely. Speaking of that, when we talked last, I know I asked you about career development, an area that I'm really passionate about, and that you told me that one of the things you've been working on was creating more talent mobility, and that in the process of the things that you've put together, you and your team, you have seen both retention and mobility go up a significant amount. In fact, I think you said internal mobility has increased from 19 to 17 from 9 to 17%, while turnover has gone down. Can you talk about how you did that?
Voluntary attrition has gone down, and also our mobility rate, like you said, has gone up. And I'm sorry, I don't have the
Hmm.
perfect numbers right in front of me right now, but certainly in the teens, which is where you want it, kind of those middling to upper teens, that mobility percent. But I think that what's important is as managers get better at that growth conversation, Andy, employees see themselves longer term in a company.
Mm.
And one of the things for us that we're also doing is really pushing to grow from within first. So before we go into the marketplace and we start looking for individuals to come in and fill roles within Procept, we are absolutely looking at our base and saying, hey, who is imminently ready to do something new and to move? And it's part of our talent planning process. We've got segments of talent that are based on readiness to do more and tapping people about, hey, you know what, this is a role I can see you in, or making sure that we advertise those roles and allow people to really understand that they can look at different roles and they can talk to different managers about opportunities. So not making that, kind of behind closed doors or taboo, like, oh my gosh, you can't go talk to that team
Hmm.
about a role because what would this team think that you're not as committed, or not all in. So we are focused on not only career development and growth within roles, but how do people start thinking about mobility across teams? And sometimes that feels really high stakes. right? It feels high stakes to go from a team where you are really a specialist to a team where you may be, a novice again. But
Mhm.
what are the half steps that exist too? How do you partner with a team on a project? How do you partner with a team, and support maybe through project management? Or how do you partner with a team and you're involved in an initiative? So there are some half steps that allow you to still work across teams or get a sense for what other teams are doing, but not necessarily go from this job to that job.
Mm. One last thing I wanted to talk with you about is something that I've become more interested in and passionate about, and yet I haven't heard too many organizations that are intentionally working on or implementing this, which is creating more community and connection inside the organization. You said this is something that you've been passionate about, that you've been working on as well. So, what's been your approach to community and connection in the workplace, and why is it so important?
I I think that when you ask people what they love about their company, um, what inevitably comes up is it would be hard to work for a company that you can't feel connected to what they're doing,
Hmm.
right? So there's a purpose element to it. And we've talked about that for years. And it even came out in, Dan Pink's book Drive with
Hmm.
purpose, mastery, and autonomy. But I always hear that I love the people I'm working with. I'm working with great people, or I've got relationships at work that really mean something to me. So the question is for us as kind of, org designers is how do you create more of those opportunities that are informal that allow people to actually form those communities? And you can do it around all kinds of things, right? You can do it around, we've got Slack, and so you've got Slack channels around fitness or around people who love great wine or people who on Fridays love to search out like the great local restaurants,
Hmm.
or you can do it within a company around celebrating the work milestones or celebrating just kind of like monthly events that bring individuals together. We do it in a lot of different ways. So one is we have high information flow as a company to our team just about how we're doing on goals. We do a post earnings recap where we always kind of break down our earnings call with our team. What were the highlights? What have we've been hearing from investor sentiment? Just really like how is our company being perceived? We then get together in communities like our director community and we talk about working across teams and we talk about goals and making sure that we have alignment. We then do community events when we have specific milestones. We then also encourage teams to take their teams off site and to just have release valves, whether it be bowling or a strategic offsite or they're just having a day throwing frisbee in a park. So there are a lot of different aspects to community, and I think that what we often miss are the informal ways to do it,
Hmm.
right? Like where it's like Thursday, and you say, hey, listen, in our collab space upstairs, we're going to have wine and cheese, swing by. And sometimes I've been in companies where you'll see somebody doing something, they'll have like, they're doing something out of their cube. They're just like inviting people to come by and have like donuts or whatever. Those small tokens of like pulling people together and breaking bread in an informal way, Andy, they go a long way to
Hmm.
creating community because there's something so humanizing about just these small moments together. So we really encourage a spectrum of opportunities.
And I think I wonder if you've looked into any of the tangible benefits of that. I've seen a few studies that basically show that the more connection people have with their colleagues, the more likely they are to stay with the organization longer. I also think that in a world where we're hearing about increasing levels of loneliness and less participation, we'll say in more traditional local communities, whether it be church or community activities in their physical, like town community, that the last remaining real opportunity is for people to connect with their colleagues, with their coworkers, right through work. And the company has an opportunity, if not an obligation, to create more of a sense of community for people to be able to stick and enjoy the people that they're around.
I love what you just said there. It is good business. It is literally, community is good business. And I think the reason why is when you know people, you don't make that fundamental attribution error, right?
Mhm.
Like this is like from like psych maybe 201 or
Mhm.
101, where when you are getting to know something, if you see something in their behavior that you have a question mark on, you can attribute it to the way that they are, their personality, or you could attribute it to personality and the situation.
Mm.
And oftentimes, the more you know somebody, if you see somebody under stress or under or kind of acting, in an atypical or a different way, you're like, okay, something's going on situationally. I need to support this individual.
Mm.
And there's an interesting stat about accidents and incidents that happen in flight. And I think it was like 73% of accidents and incidents that happen in flight actually have to happen the first time a crew flies together.
Mm.
And part of that is because there's no connective
A
tissue, there's
cohesion.
not the
Yeah.
anticipation, there's no none of the small kind of like shorthand that I've got your back, I can cover that,
Hmm.
or like, you do this and I'll do that. And when teams are under stress, that's really what gets them through, is that kind of like that shorthand mentality that we're all in this together,
Hmm.
egos are to the side, but we've got a mission to accomplish.
Yeah. We trust
So
each other.
community is just good business.
And I seem to remember that instead of ERGs, you were creating or working on tribes. Is that right? Can you
Yeah,
talk about that?
actually, so it's interesting. We had our sales meeting in January, and a couple of us got together and did a session that was about building your tribe. And for us, the concept of a tribe here is like, who is that group of people that just like they root for you, like your
Mhm.
inner circle, like they root for you. If your name comes up in a meeting, they're like, oh my gosh, isn't that person amazing? Like, wow, what a skill set. Wow, what a deep thinker. But they are rooting for you. And privately, if you need some, adjustment or reinforcement, that they're certainly giving that as well to see you be successful. But the sense of tribes are like, how do you build relationships that are really important in the workplace?
Mhm.
And what is your skin in the game? And it's interesting, sometimes in relationships, it's like, hey, Andy, I'll put 50% in and you put 50% in. But the
Mhm.
truth is that if I want a relationship with you that is productive and really meaningful and durable, I have to put 100% in because I can't control what you're going to put in. But I know that I got to really lean in to make sure that I'm bringing you toward me.
Right. Yeah, makes sense.
So that's really the concept of tribes. It's like, hey, you've got this inner circle rooting for your success,
Hmm.
really giving you great feedback. Those are your people. Maybe you've got a circle outside of that where people you really respect and trust, but maybe you need more time with. Maybe you've got a circle outside of that that you transact with, but it feels like it's distant. How do you maybe think about some of those people differently? And then you may have individuals in the workplace where you're like, gosh, if I'm going to be successful this year, this relationship has to get markedly better.
Hmm.
And then what are the strategies to do that?
Absolutely. Stacey, we've covered a lot of ground here, including building high performance culture, the leadership development programs, communities and tribes and connection. Anything we didn't cover that you're particularly proud of in the work that you and your team has done there?
Oh gosh, I think a couple of things, Andy. I do find that it is interesting to really put kind of new eyes on old processes. And
Mhm.
when I say old, what I mean is, running a company with social beings that are achievement oriented means that you have to organize in certain ways. You've got to think about how you flow information. You've got to think about how you set goals. You've got to think about how you build teams. You've got to think about how you run meetings. So I always love taking like a concept like goal setting, or goal alignment, and looking at it with completely fresh eyes and saying, okay, you know what, how can we do this so that these two groups feel like they're both working on consequential work and they can do it together? It has the same priority. They've got kind of this like mashup of skills so that the work is actually challenging but interesting too. So I think that there are lots of ways that we organize as companies that sometimes just need a fresh approach. So we're also really looking at productivity too.
I love that. Something that we can all always be looking at how we can get better at.
Well,
Um,
and it feels like hygiene, right? It's like
yeah,
kind of good hygiene. It's not anything like new, right?
right.
It literally is taking older kind of concepts
Hmm.
in organizational design, but saying, okay, at this stage, how do we think about really making sure that people have challenging, ambitious, personal goals that ladder up to professional activities that help the company be successful, that actually then put rewards back in their pockets. Like it's just, there's a loop.
Are there any trends that you're following right now that you are especially excited about in the HR talent development world?
You know what? I'm watching pretty much everything. Certainly the how we're bringing AI into the workplace. But at the same time, I am still thinking about just some of these like, systems and structures that have been around for a long time that we want to optimize. But at the same time, always looking at what is new in this generation of work, right? Like what do people really care about? Do they care about getting great feedback in a timely way from people that they really respect and trust? Do they care about having multiple opportunities in a company? Do they care about really really building skills, and how do they want to do that? Yeah, I'm following a lot, and certainly staying up too late sometimes thinking about these things.
I know all of us are really wondering where things are going. You showed me earlier your huge book collection. I know you're a voracious reader and lifelong learner. Any books you've read lately or been excited about or made a big impact that you would want to recommend to others?
Well, interestingly enough, I read all kinds of like, just I read kind of broadly.
Mm,
And I think the reason why is I'm trying to just take a lot of concepts in and just figure out like where they fit. This one is a book that I love. It's called Talent Wins, and this is by Ram Charan, Dominic Barton, and Dennis Carey.
mm,
And it's really about a people forward talent plan. But I will also tell you, Andy, I'm reading a book too, and it's on my bookcase, which is called The Design of Cities.
mm,
And it's all about how cities are designed and how you think about building community in cities and how you think about how places of commerce and places
mm.
of where people live and work and kind of build lives, and how cities are set up to create not only this sense of prosperity but this sense of community. So I'm reading all kinds of things. I also have a book that this came from my husband's collection because this is something that he is part of his profession, but it's 101 Things I Learned in Architecture School.
Mm.
And this is by Matthew Friedrich. And so it's fascinating because there's so many things here that actually go into the design of a durable structure that can be looked at in organizations.
Interesting. Design of cities. I'm gonna have to check that out. I used to love designing roads and cities when I was younger playing SimCity, and I really wanted to be a civil engineer, and instead I'm here running a talent development podcast. But you just never know.
Hey, listen, there's a lot of common threads there.
Um, on that note, the last question I want to ask you is about career development, career advice. You come from a background, came up in talent development
I
to
did.
become a chief people officer. For those listening out there who work in talent development, who have strong ambitions of maybe moving into a more senior HR, chief people officer role one day, what advice would you give?
Yeah. One of the things for me that what was great about kind of the talent development vertical is you get really you get very committed to the growth of individuals.
Mhm.
And I have not met somebody, and Andy, I am sure you would say this as well, who is in talent development that does not believe in people and
Mhm.
their growth and their evolution and their progress, and that they can surprise the hell out of you and nobody knows their potential except for them.
Mm.
So I think that that's an important foundation if you're going to be a chief people officer to really believe in people. And you can imagine there are organizations where it's like, wait, people need guardrails and policies and they need to have, curbs. certainly in some aspects, but what is the belief system around, adults working with adults? So I really appreciated having that. And that actually comes from my parents. They were educational activists, and that's really where that belief that everybody can learn came from. But I would also say talent is broad. I mean, you've got talent strategy, you've got talent analytics, you've got talent operations, you've got talent rewards, you've got, the talent performance area. So I think that having a talent vertical really can spill over into these other aspects of running a people function because they are definitely interwoven.
I like that. I have so many more questions, but we are out of time, Stacey. Thank you again for coming back to join us on the podcast and to share all the great things that you've been doing there. I am looking forward to keeping in
7 years
touch.
later, Andy.
7 years later, I'm looking forward to keeping in touch and doing this with you again in 2032, I think.
Let's cut it in half.
Okay. Maybe sooner. And we'll
Yeah.
certainly keep talking between now and then. So thank you again, Stacey, and best of luck with everything you do.
Thanks, Andy. I had a blast.